I'm going to talk to you about collaborative red tide research we're doing to improve the community resilience on the southwest coast of Florida. I want to call out 4 of our partners first, which are NOS, the Southeast Fisheries Science Center, the state of Florida, and the Florida Commercial Waterman's Conservation that are critical to having this work done. Red tides are naturally occurring in the state of Florida. They've been around since the time the Spanish colonizers heard about them from the Native Americans. However, at times, they can become quite intense and cause massive ecological and socioeconomic damage to the coastal communities and the coastal ecosystems. The most recent example of this was the bloom that we had from 2017 to 2019. And this one affected the entire coast, both west and east coast of Florida. With the economic damage, these communities are largely reliant upon tourism and fishing. Survey of just 150 some businesses out in Fort Myers Beach showed almost $50 million in losses in just 13 weeks. So this is not a scientific survey, but shows massive economic damages. In addition to those losses in tourism, there's massive impacts on fisheries. You can see in 2018, a lot of the fisheries here dropping quite dramatically in the number of landings. This led a fisherman to say his office was on fire, he didn't know it, and nobody told him, which really speaks to NOAA's need to step in and provide better information to these stakeholders. Here at AOML, I don't know why this is blank. So this is a timeline of research we've done. We've been doing research in South Florida for about 20 years that it's been originally related to South Florida ecosystem restoration. And since, there we go, now it's, I don't know what happened. So what happens when you tell me to animate something? So we've been working kind of south of the main red tide zone. We've done some work with red tide before, mostly to calibrate remote sensing work of our partners at USF primarily. But beginning in July 2018, the Southeast Fisheries Science Center had a workshop related to ecosystem-based fisheries management where we saw how devastating this was for those communities and the need for NOAA to step up and act to improve conditions for them. And we're trying to do this by giving them better information to make their decisions and see what's going on in their ecosystem, develop a better understanding of what causes these devastating blooms, better quantification of the socioeconomic impact so we can speak to the need for this type of research, and hopefully ultimately leading to seasonal and subseasonal forecasting. One of the first things we did was to take one of our cruises, expand it through additional funding from NOS and the fishery and NIMS. And one of the things we saw out there was this giant hypoxic zone, which is right in the middle of the stone crab nursery grounds. We had a commercial fisherman out there with us. And when we started to see this, I was working the CTD, he started asking, how common is this? Does this always happen with red tides? Is this a regular summertime condition? And we couldn't answer those questions because we don't have systematic data monitoring out there. So this fisherman was extremely impressive. Casey Streeter was his name. He went back to his community, spun up his own nonprofit called the Florida Commercial Waterman's Conservation, and said, we go back and forth to our fishing grounds every few weeks through these waters. We will take measurements for you. So we have them trained up. They're taking measurements right now, taking profiles with YSIs, and they're taking some discrete samples as well, sending that data back to us. We QA/QC it, develop plots like this, send it back to them. They share it with the community, put it on their Facebook pages. So they're getting that information real quickly. It's also improving our science. We've still continued to do these cruises and have partnered even more closely with the state now, and they've expanded the cruises. And we started seeing things like this deep water phenomenon and the data coming from the fishermen. So we went out and sampled it more extensively. And what we found was, we're still investigating this because only 2 months ago, a lower dissolved oxygen, higher chlorophyll fluorescence. It did not, at least preliminary, hasn't contained the red tide organisms in it, but it could be the oceanographic conditions necessary to set up the red tide bloom that really picked up about 2 weeks after that cruise. In addition to ecology, we're working with our partners at UF, Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and the Southeast Fisheries Science Center to really try and quantify holistically the impacts of red tide, so that can speak to the value of the research we're doing and the need to mitigate this in the future. Of course, all this research we're doing, not just for ourselves, we're doing this to improve the community resilience. So we're really communicating as much as we can with these communities and the fishermen. A lot of that's now being done, email, telephone, text, but we'd really like to formalize this. And we started having some conversations with NOS and their Gulf of Mexico harmful algal bloom bulletin to see if we can start getting some of this information into their bulletin so it goes out on a more regular basis through a more formal process. This research is obviously tightly aligned with the NOAA strategic objectives, especially the blue economy. There's a public-private state partnership, tightly aligned with the NOAA research strategic plan and the OIR corporate priorities that you heard yesterday. Now, as you can tell, this research is just getting started. We have a number of ideas of how we want to expand it, starting with expanding the commercial fishermen's monitoring efforts. Right now, we have about 4 transect lines. We envision blanketing the entire west coast of Florida and the Florida Keys. And we want to use this information to understand what causes the blooms and ultimately get to the seasonal and subseasonal predictions. This research is not possible without the list of partners you see here. This is really truly a collaborative partnership research endeavor.